I'm Julie Ross.
And I'm Gregory Abbey.
And you're listening to the Parenting Horizons podcast.
Julie is a longtime parent educator and counselor.
And Greg is an actor, writer, and director, and more importantly, a parent just like you.
Through conversations covering a range of different topics, challenges, and roadblocks, we hope to give you a few of Julie's tools that might just help make parenting a little bit easier.
Look, nobody's perfect, and parenting is challenging, to say the least. With a few skills under our belts, though, we might just be able to be good enough parents and enjoy the journey and our children a little bit more in the process.
Okay, welcome to our first podcast of 2022.
Yay!
Yay! I want to celebrate, except that the world still feels so insane 2 years later.
It does. I hope that 22 brings about change. That's my hope. Not that the change is here right now, but that it will bring about change.
I hope so, because before Julie and I started recording, we just both went over our COVID stories over the Christmas break because it's now reared its head again. And we are going to bring back a specialist on in a couple episodes, I think, to kind of revisit it, the idea that this COVID still is really a thing and how it's affecting our kids. But today we're going to talk about, so I was speaking with Julie about this, and she said one of her clients calls them Julieisms. And these are some these are some terms that kind of come up in your work, right? And come up in the parenting groups that I kind of remember the term, and then I'm like, what is this again? So I thought it might be cool and fun to kind of revisit some of these that I think we've talked about off the cuff here and there on some of the episodes.
Right.
So I just wanted to go through a couple of them because I think they're great. And the first one is something that we brought up on the last episode, or it might have been the episode before, which was conflict of loyalty. And we brought it up in relationship to divorced parents and how it comes up with divorced parents. And I started reframing it and thinking about it like, is this something that comes up when in an intact family when the parents are married? And so can you, again, maybe talk a little bit about first what conflict of loyalty is in relationship to, say, a divorced couple?
Sure, yeah. Conflict of loyalty occurs when the parents argue with one another, the exes argue with one another about something. Often that is something that has to do with the kids, just because that's the nature of most of their conversations. So what happens is when the kids hear the parents arguing about something, they feel a conflict of loyalty, because what kids want is to love both parents and to be loved by both parents. And so what happens when exes disagree in front of the kids is the kids feel like they have to pick sides. And, picking mom's side or one parent's side over the other feels disloyal to the other parent, to the side that they're not picking. And that's where that conflict comes up. That's where the child feels a sense of sometimes shame, often fear, because, do I love one parent more than the other? And that's not the way it's supposed to be? And does that mean that one parent loves me more than the other parent? It creates this huge kind of emotional reaction that is, quite frankly, painful for kids.
Right. And so that's why
they shouldn't have to choose between their parents.
Right. And that's why it's detrimental, is what you're saying, is that.
Exactly.
So how do you, and I want to get to like an intact family, but just let's stay in divorced families. And how do you avoid that? I mean, obviously you don't want to be arguing in front of the kids about, whatever it is, but I guess your point is that it's just really important that they don't have a sense that they have to choose between one or the other.
Exactly. So the way that you avoid it is first and foremost, literally, don't argue in front of the kids. Don't let them overhear you arguing with your ex.
Mm-hmm.
That's just critical. That's kind of number one. The second thing is don't put the kid in the middle. So don't say to the child, I can't believe your other parent won't let you watch TV or watch this show or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So criticizing the other parent in front of the child does effectively the same thing in terms of bringing up this conflict of loyalties. And those are the things to avoid, because I think nobody intends in a divorce to put their child in the middle. Certainly all of the divorced couples that I've worked with have said, our children are the most important thing to us. We want to preserve our relationship with them. We want to make sure that they still feel loved by both of us. So their intentions can be very good.
Yeah, everyone comes into it, you mean, feeling that way. Like that's what they want, ideally.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. The problem, of course, is that, that's an ideal expectation, and it isn't dealing with kind of what the reality is. And there's kind of two things that come up in divorced families which cause that to go awry. One is money, when one partner feels unfairly treated by the other partner in terms of money. All the old intentions go out the window, and
Hmm.
they're fighting for that. And the other time that all the intentions go out the window is if there's infidelity.
You mean
Um,
they kind of lose that equilibrium around trying to keep things sort of away from the kids or
right.
whatever? I mean, not that they're not necessarily talking about the affair, but talking about the other parent. I mean, is that what you found in
Well,
your experience?
they've felt so hurt
Mm,
by, when a parent has an affair, the person to whom that was done, I mean, the partner who didn't have the affair,
mm,
when that comes to light, the person feels so betrayed, so hurt. Their ego really takes a blow, because it's like, what was wrong with me that you had to
right,
go outside of our marriage for this?
right.
That they lose, because the ego is so engaged there. They
Mm,
really lose their sense of keeping the kids at the heart of things, because the natural thing when our ego feels hurt, the natural thing that we try to do is seek revenge.
right,
So turning the kids against the other parents becomes a
right,
part
right,
of what can happen there. Even subconsciously, not knowing that that's what you're intending to do. Oh, yeah, that's your father. Oh, yeah, well, your father would say that. And I am
right.
only using the father because that was my experience as a child of divorce.
Oh,
Is my
oh,
my mother would use a tone of voice when she spoke about him, and roll her eyes at the same time, and it was very derogatory, to
right.
my father. And I felt that conflict of loyalty as the child. I wanted to defend my father. So
Yeah, but
um
can I just ask you, because as I'm listening to you, and maybe this is kind of obvious, that you have to obviously guard against that as the parent, and sometimes you can't help it, and sometimes it slips out subtly, even if it's not infidelity. But I'm kind of imagining
right.
you. Wouldn't you say that ultimately all that does is make the child feel? I mean, you said a lot of things, but bad about themselves, like to hear their parent, who they have a visceral, natural, genetic connection to, psychological, that all they do is feel bad or confused or what, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it makes them feel horrible. And all of a sudden they are put into the middle. And just as an aside, my father did not have an affair. But um but my mother was very angry. I mean,
Right,
anger is often, more often
right.
than not, a part of divorce, and I think for them it was the money aspect about it. But yeah, I mean, the child just feels so caught in that moment. Do I defend the other
Right.
parent?
Or do
You
I
know,
support the parent that's complaining about the other parent?
precisely. Like, how do you know what to do as a kid there?
Right.
And the thing is, if you defend the other parent, then you feel bad and like we said before, disloyal to the first parent.
Mm-hmm.
But if you side with that parent, you feel disloyal to the other parent. It is a no-win situation for kids when parents criticize the other one in front of the kid or fight overtly in front of the kid.
So let's talk a little bit about how that translates to an intact family where the parents are married and maybe in a fairly stable marriage. I mean, it seems like a lot of it, of what you've already said, kind of translates in terms of criticizing the other parent, because that could happen in an intact marriage. Criticizing the other parent, that the kid is going to have the same sort of feelings, obviously. I guess the reason I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this is because my own wife and I have struggled, and I talked to her a little bit about it this morning to kind of refresh myself. This idea of conflict of loyalty, because I know that we have had times in our marriage where we didn't necessarily agree on how to parent. Let's say,
Sure.
and we didn't have, let's say whether it was electronics or
Hmm.
it's sugar, or I think those are some of the things that we kind of struggle with. And my wife would say, and I'm going to try to be balanced about this because she's not here to speak for herself, but my remembrance is that my wife would say, we need to have a united front. This is maybe a little different than what we're talking about, but we need to have a united front and then approach the kids, with the united front about how we feel. And I would be like, well, I don't feel the same way. So maybe this is
Right.
slightly different, but what do you do in those circumstances where you don't feel the same way as a parent? And is conflict of loyalty, if they sense there's a difference in how the parents feel? I guess let's start with, is conflict of loyalty the same thing that can occur in an intact marriage?
I suppose it can, but generally, what happens in the difference between an intact family and a divorced family is there is in an intact family, the child doesn't have a sense of loss. They feel pretty secure in their parents' love for them and pretty secure in their love for both of their parents.
Hmm.
When a family divorces, there's a sense of loss and of grief that goes along with that because one
Right.
parent generally moves out.
Right. Right.
And kind of the world that the child thought they knew is no longer
Right.
present.
Completely destabilizing in a way that's not happening with an intact family
Exactly. So
marriage.
what generally happens when in an intact marriage where the parents are disagreeing, the child sees that as an opportunity.
To
Because
win.
exactly, it's like, okay, who is the most likely person to give me what I want here? And
Right.
and so it's not so much a conflict, it's more a strategic way for kids to divide and conquer,
Hmm.
create a good cop bad cop situation. Maybe they know that mom is super strict about sugar and dad or the other parent is not strict about sugar. So who are they going to go to for the sugar?
Right. Right.
They're going to go to the parent who isn't strict because they've learned that the parents are divided on this, and yay for loopholes.
Right. And I know it comes up around electronics, and this has come up in our parenting group that I can remember a parent talking about. It was really distinct. Like her husband really like gave the kids candy. It was something extreme. So I guess that
Mhm.
is my question. I mean, that's kind of an extreme example. But what do you do when you don't really agree? Because I think what I struggle with my wife was like, hey, we have to have a united front and approach them together as a united front and present this. This is how we feel. And I'd be like, I don't feel the same way as you. And I always felt kind of stuck. So what do you do in that situation? Do you keep working it out as a couple until you come to a compromise and present? Do you let, like, hey, you feel really strongly about this, so I'm going to step out of it, and I won't be negative, I won't denigrate this idea, but I'm also not going to, stand next to you as we talk to the kids about it? Or should you do that? Like, what do you do in that situation when parents are, and sometimes like the parent in our group, it was a huge gap where the husband, I think, was literally like, "Oh, sugar, who cares?" and was giving them candy all the time. That's kind of
Right.
extreme, but What do you do in those situations?
It is as complex as you imagine. It's very
It's
challenging.
confusing
So,
as I'm explaining it because it feels
yeah,
like there's a lot of levels to it.
there's a lot of levels to it. So let me just rewind for a moment and talk about the reason that we advocate for a united front in the family.
Okay.
The reason that we advocate for that is that and try as much as possible as parents to provide a united front is because in a healthy family, the family dynamic, the structure of the family is like an upside down pyramid.
Okay.
So you've got the widest part, which is
Mhm.
usually the base, is actually at the top, and the narrowest part is at the bottom. And ideally, a healthy family, a high functioning family has the parents
Mm.
when it's a two parent household, has the
Right.
parents at the top of that pyramid at at those 2 points. And then what is below at the point of the pyramid that it's kind of balancing on, if you're envisioning it, are the children.
Mhm.
That's the way the power structure in the family works best. Kids don't have a lot of power because they shouldn't have a lot of power.
Sure. Sure.
Um, and I'm not saying, it's really important that I clarify when I talk about power. I'm not talking about power in the form of disrespect. Children are very equal to adults in many ways. They're
Right.
equally deserving of respect. They're equally deserving of being taken care of, being nurtured,
Being
being
heard,
loved.
having their needs met.
Exactly. They're equal to parents. So that's a straight line that you would see as opposed to a pyramid. But they are not old enough to handle the same amount of power that parents in the family have. It actually makes them feel very unsafe
That
when
that they don't want
when
that power, you mean?
they don't really want it. So when you see a child who's grabbing for power, most of the time, it's not that they want the power, it's that they want the parents to take the reins back.
Right, right. I mean, we've
Right.
had this moment, and this is kind of simplistic. I mean, to you because you're a parenting expert, but not to me. That I've over the years in the moments where it's not that we do set boundaries, but in the moments where we've really set a boundary, they've responded to it. That's what you mean, right? It's like, oh, they were
Right.
looking for this. That kid that's kind of acting out and pushing. And again, I think you would say it's not about showing your power. It's not about being punitive, but it is about setting a boundary and who's in control so they feel safer, right? That sounds like what you're saying.
100%. They know that
Right.
they know that they can't handle that much power, that much decision-making stuff. They want a healthy triangle.
And similar to conflict of loyalty, it sounds like it just feels safer for them if they feel like it's generally equal between the parents, right? That there isn't like two sides to everything like, oh, this is generally how they feel. I mean, it just stands to reason that they would feel more secure in themselves knowing like this is what it is in my home with my parents.
Precisely. Precisely. Then, it lessens the mixed messages. It lessens that opportunistic nature that most, not just kids, people have, which is like, what's the path of least resistance if you've got equal power between the parents. So that's really the reason that we want a united front, generally speaking.
Okay.
To answer the kind of second part of the question where it gets a little bit more complicated because we're dealing with real life and not philosophical ideals, right?
Right, right.
Philosophy is all well and good until it doesn't translate into how to actually do something about it. So the pertinent question that you asked, Greg, is what happens when you don't agree
Hmm.
with your spouse on something or your partner on something? I mean, how do you handle one parent's all for as much sugar as you can pound into your mouth per
Right,
day versus the more aesthetic, I don't want any sugar at all in my children's bodies.
right, right.
So the answer to that is a bit complex because it's determined how that works out is is often determined by the health of the marriage in general.
Okay. That makes
And
sense.
and the level of respect that the parents have for one another. Because when you have those extremes present, you have to also have a willingness to really hear the other person out. Tell me why it's so important. Tell me what's going on here. And then have the other person listen to you.
Right, right.
And, in a respectful way where they're not coming up with points, ways to make their point or to put you down, but are really listening to why you feel so strongly that sugar should be available all the time. And then there has to be, a willingness to compromise. Part of the problem, as probably our listeners can imagine, and certainly you and I can, is that if that respect isn't there, if you've got one parent who's completely checked out, I have a lot of clients who sadly, one of the parents is just checked out. It's like, well, let him do whatever. And
I
the other
feel like,
parent, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, you go ahead. You go ahead. And the other parent.
And the and the other parent feels like they are trying to perform the Sisyphean task of, rolling
Right.
this boulder up a mountain that, never really gets anywhere. And that's in a strong marriage. Even when that happens, often the parents have the kind of communication where they can go and say, I'm feeling that like this is a
Right.
Sisyphean
Right.
situation,
Right.
and we need to at least talk about it to where we can kind of get, if not completely aligned, at least decide who's going to be the person that enforces this particular rule, right? Go ahead. Now
Well,
you
I was
go
just
ahead.
okay. Now I'll go. Well, it's just interesting because as I'm talking to you, or I'm sorry, as I'm listening to you, what I'm realizing is that the answer to this question, which you kind of just said, is that it really comes down to the relationship between the mother and father, right? That's what you're saying. I mean, the
Yeah,
kid is
between the
kind of
two
left.
parents. It could be between mother and mother, or father and father, or,
Sure,
two parents.
right.
Sure.
And that idea is that if you don't have that strength in your relationship, that it's gonna be really tricky. It's funny because as I think about this specific parent who this came up a few times, like the husband was so diametrically opposed to her. I think they weren't volatile or mean to each other, but she was basically doing all the work and he was totally checked out. And if that's the case, that's about the marriage, is what it sounds like you're saying. That's about the marriage, and then that's about repairing that, however you need to
Exactly.
do that, right?
That's exactly what I'm saying. You have to look at the symptoms and then diagnose the cause of why is this so inflammatory? Why is this so, how did the couple get to be at the point where they're diametrically opposed? Now, in every marriage, Greg, my own included, right? And my husband and I have been married for 40 years. I mean, that's a
Mm,
really long time.
yeah,
But in any marriage, of course, there are going to be differences of opinion. Of
sure.
course, there are going to be differences in thought about how we raise our children. That's inevitable. That's part and parcel of figuring it out as you go along,
Right.
right? And what that means is that generally speaking, if you've got, a good relationship, sometimes one of you, when the other person feels so strongly about something,
Right. Right.
sometimes one of you, sometimes being on the same page, quote unquote, means taking a back seat and just
Right.
saying,
Right.
you know what?
I
And
can
and
see this
saying to
has a lot of meaning for you, and I think that's usually where we landed, that it wasn't like a big fight, but there were some things I think between my wife and I where I think that's really important. I don't know that we did that perfectly, but it sounds like you might have to say, like, you know what? You feel really strongly about this. I feel, but I'm going to step back because obviously this is important to you. And I think if you're in a good relationship, that hopefully you're able to do that.
Well, exactly. And stepping back also means that when the child comes to you and tries to get a different answer, you say, you know what? I agree with your other parent on this. I
Right.
mean, you don't have to present it together. You don't have to, if you really just can't be in agreement about it, that's okay. Take the back seat, let the other parent take the lead. But when being on the same page and keeping that triangle in the correct direction
Right.
really means being able to say, you know what, other parents and I discussed this and we decided, because again, loopholes. Kids are all about the loopholes,
Well, that's the
right?
thing. If they sense, I mean, because again, back to conflict of loyalty, and I understand the instinct because I've had it myself too. There's just no benefit in throwing the other parent under the bus, even if it's subtle. And I think because
Mhm.
two things, like you said, then in an intact marriage relationship, that the kid is then, oh, great, I see a weak point here that, let's say dad thinks I can have candy. I'm going to go to him. But also that even if it's subtly, you're saying, well, you know how your mom feels about chocolate cake. So, buddy, you're out of luck. I mean, he's just
Right.
the child will just feel, it just makes it so complicated for them. Right. And listen, I
It
know I've done
does.
it. So I'm not saying I'm certainly not perfect, but it's just not helpful ultimately for the kid as much as you can to be as balanced as you can around it.
Exactly. And the other thing is, another really, I think, positive strategy that parents can use when the kid comes to them and says, other parent won't let me have chocolate cake, instead of saying, well, you know how the other parent feels about chocolate cake, which is the tendency, and obviously
Right.
you just said don't do it.
Right.
So what do we do instead? Here's where it's really cool. Empower your kid. So it says, it sounds like you are really, frustrated and angry with your other parent, and that you have very strong feelings around that chocolate cake. What do you think you could do? I mean, I wonder if it would help to go back and talk to them about it.
Right. Right.
To say, maybe, look, could this be an occasional thing? Or is it something that I could do at birthdays? Where's the middle ground? But really empowering that child to go back and have a conversation,
Right.
and stand up for what they want.
Well, yeah, and then it's also encouraging what we've talked about a ton of times on the podcast is the kind of relationship and connection of how you well stand up for yourself, but how you talk, how you connect. I love that idea of like, hey, you know what, mom and we have slightly differing views on this, but I respect her. She feels strongly about this, but I understand you're frustrated by this. Maybe we can talk about, maybe it's for you to go talk to mom or dad, whoever it is, parent. I love that idea, right? That's what you're saying is like, how do you then, here's another opportunity for relationship dynamics. Like, how do you now go to
Yeah.
her and say, hey, I know this is driving you crazy because whatever, you can't spend the night, you can't play your video game. Think about why and maybe go try to have a conversation about it with her, him, her,
It's
whoever, them.
him, her, them. Yeah, that's so right, dead on. And I hope that, our listeners will rewind what you just said and listen to it again. Because you phrased it so beautifully, Greg. You said, mom or, other parent and I don't really, see eye to eye on everything. And I respect them. I respect your
Right,
other
right.
parents. So,
Because it
it,
is like it is a little delusional isn't the right word, but the idea that what you said is like this is not a Pollyanna world. Like people are going to disagree about things, and then the question is how do you handle it when you disagree? And again, I'm kind of idealizing it. I've definitely never done it right, but as I'm talking to you, this is how I wished I could do it, and I have done this is to say, hey, I don't feel the same way as his mom. But you know what? She feels strongly, and I do understand parts of her point of view, and this is important to her. You're obviously frustrated by it. I guess my point is like, yeah, because in the real world, you are gonna say like, hey, we don't feel the same way, and you know what? You're not gonna feel the same way as everyone you're in relationship with.
right. Right. I mean, I feel like it's such good modeling for kids about what the real world looks like. Whether you're talking about family relationships or employment relationships or whatever, you have to abide by kind of what parents or bosses set up And you still have the right to your voice. You still have the
Right.
right to go back to somebody, anybody that you disagree with,
Mm.
school, right?
Mm.
I so admire it was not something that I ever felt comfortable with in school, but I so admire kids who, they'll get a grade and
Mm.
they'll be like, "No, I think this is wrong." And they go back to the teacher and they say, "I need
And
you to look at
advocate.
this." Yeah,
Right.
and they advocate for themselves. And I think that starts at home, because home is should be a really safe environment where kids can advocate for themselves and be listened to and heard and still told no, right? If it's appropriate to say
Well,
no.
yeah, and I think that's the idea of what you're talking about with power. Power doesn't mean putting your thumb on the child so you're showing them who has the authority. To me, it's empowering them, like you said, and giving them the opportunity to be angry, talk back, have their feelings, stand up for themselves. And ideally, that's what you're saying, is that if you can build that in your home, they can hopefully take that out into their own relationships, workplace, friendships, that they don't feel squashed. So, okay, I'm going to call an audible, which is a football term, which means I'm changing things up because I have one Judaism left and I had a list of them, but I'm going to save I'm going to save my list for another episode because
Okay.
we've talked for a while. And so what I want to finish up, because I think this Judaism is and you must be so anxious to know what Judaism I'm going to mention. This is one of my favorite Judaisms, and I think it's connected to how you deal with your kids, but also it's in relationship to what we were talking about when a couple is in conflict about how they feel about something. We've talked about this Judaism a couple times, but I want to go over it again because it's one of my favorites, and it's the box step of communication.
Yeah.
We've never
Yeah.
done a whole episode on it, but I want to finish with that because I think it's in relation to what we were talking about. And so can you talk a little bit? I kind of remember it. And in fact, my wife and I brought it up just last week because we were like, you get angry and you stop listening. And my
Right.
wife said something like, we're not really remember the box step of communication? You just seem pissed off. And so maybe I'll say it and you can help me along with it. So that the box step of
Sure.
communication is literally the dance step, this relationship to the
Mhm.
box step dance. And it's when you're in conflict with someone, right? Potentially,
Yep. Mhm.
whether it's your
Exactly.
child or your partner. And this is good. Like,
Mhm.
let's say that the couple is in conflict. Well, as I remember, the box step is, so just like in the dance, you step back. In your mind, you step
Right.
back, but the first step back represents, I'm going to listen. Is that
Yep.
correct?
That is
So you
absolutely
so
100%.
you feel heated and it's very difficult, but can you catch yourself and take a step back? Okay, I'm pretty wound up. I have my point of view. I have my arguments built, but you know what? I'm going to step back and try to really listen even if I don't agree. So that's, you step back, that's listening.
Mhm.
Then
Yep.
you step to the side
Mhm.
and you're like, is there one thing in this argument that they're making or this point of view they have? I don't really agree with it, but is there one thing that they're saying that I can hold on to and say, okay, I kind of understand that. Is that correct?
Right. That's correct.
Okay,
Exactly.
so now you
You're
have the
getting
one
100 on the exam so
so
far,
far.
Greg.
Okay, good. Well, this is my favorite one, so I try to remember it even if I don't always do it. So you step back, you listen, you step to the side. Okay, I can hold on to that thing. I kind of agree with that one thing. So then you step forward and you acknowledge that to your partner or your child. Hey,
Yes.
I see that. You know what? I get it. You love video games. They're like your biggest passion and it sounds like you're so excited about it and it means so much to you. Or, you know what? I get it. Sugar, it's not really healthy. You feel really strongly about it. You feel, you have a lot of concern over how much, our daughter is eating candy, whatever it is. Right? So that's the step
Mhm.
forward.
Yep. Mhm.
And then as the closing the circle, I think, or closing the box step is that, so you've acknowledged them so they feel heard, right?
Mhm.
Because we all just want to be heard, whether we're a child or a partner. And then you step to the side and say, I hear all of that, and
Yes.
I feel, and this is where you can maybe share yourself, because it's not about shutting out your own point of view, but it's
At
about,
all.
right? So it's about listening. And I say and because you've caught me a few times, and I think this is really important. And what you've said in the past is the word but kind of just refutes everything they just said. hey, I hear you
It
saying
does.
all of this, but it's bullshit or whatever, but is basically saying like, but I'm going to ignore that. But if you can say, and
Yeah.
what feels like a small thing, but I think is really important to say, I hear all of this. I hear you saying this. I actually see your point of view. And this is what I'm struggling with.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
And, and it's important for our listeners to understand that, it may take several box steps. It
Right.
may take
Right.
it's not necessarily, when you step to the side and you say, and, I feel concerned. And that's another good point here is that when we frame our own communication, we want to do it with an I statement.
And why is
So in
that
other words,
important?
so we often fall into use statements. So let's just take the example of, you complete the box step. If you were to say, I hear all of that and I can agree with that, but you always, right? So now we've got a but and a you in there, right? And that you might as well just throw the whole whatever you've just done out the window. Even if you were to say, and, I hear all of that, and you're too harsh with the kids around, blah, blah, blah. That puts the other person on the defensive.
Right.
Yeah. So what I statements do is that they allow you to own your own feelings. And it's difficult to refute how someone else feels. It's very hard to say, oh, you don't feel that way. I've had people do it, but the reality is that if you say, I feel concerned that it's X, Y, or Z, you're probably not going to get that response of, you don't feel concerned. If you do, you have another couple of box steps to do, right?
Right.
But it de-escalates both the and the I statement, de-escalate conflict. And of course, if you're in the box step of communication, it almost automatically means that there's some sort of disagreement, some sort of conflict that's going on. So you just want to make sure that you use I statements, and you may say, I feel concerned, and then they butt in because they're not doing the same box step as you, and they butt in and they say, you're always defending the kids. They might butt into your, quite eloquent piece of communication that you're engaging in.
Right. And then, I like that this idea you've said before too is that, and we've said this about everything we talk on every episode, is that it's not a magic panacea. Like, it takes time, it takes practice. Like you said, you might have to do the box step a few times. You might have to hold on to yourself, especially if your partner's jumping in, and not listening. But it's really about listening. I mean, that's the main thing. It's like, okay, can I catch myself here?
I really believe that most of the biggest proportion of a healthy relationship involves true listening, seeking to understand the other person.
So why don't
the other thing that might occur, Greg, too, is just, if your partner is very defensive and keeps coming at you and accusatory, and even though you're doing a good job with the box step, step out.
Stop. Take a break.
Stop the dance. Take a break.
Right.
Stop the dance. Take a break. Say, you've given me some food for thought. Let me go review this in my head, and we'll talk again. Because there's nothing to be gained by escalating something that's already, quite hot to the touch.
Well, especially if the other partner is not able to do it in the moment. You're saying which makes sense, that it's okay to say like if you're doing the box step and your partner's like you interrupting you every second, that it's okay to say like, let's because circle back is one of your other huge Juliisms, that you can circle back, that you can leave and circle back, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to know when is the moment, kind of point of no return where it's just not going to get better in this particular conversation.
So I don't think we often recap. I don't know that we need to recap all of this stuff, but I think what I want to finish with, and maybe this is the main Juliism. I mean, the main Juliism is listening, And can you just, because this is one of my favorite quotes that's kind of come up a few times about listening and recreating the other person, and who is it? And can we just finish with that?
Yeah. I love that. I love that as well. The quote that you're talking about, that you're referring to, is by Brenda Euland. So Brenda Euland wrote an article for the Utne Reader years ago called Tell Me More. And it follows along the lines of what M. Scott Peck wrote in his book, The Road Less Traveled. And he said, listening is the purest act of love that we can show to another person, that it's action, not that's an act of love. And Brenda Euland, I don't know if she knew that quote, but she certainly expanded on it in my mind. She said, when people listen to us, they are the ones that we are drawn toward, as if to just sit in their radius would do us good. She says that between speaker and listener, there's an alternating current within which ideas begin to come to life, to grow, to expand, and to flower. And she said further, listening is an act that recreates both the speaker and the listener. And Greg, when I first read that, when I first thought about listening as an act of love, and I first thought about it as, creating this space where ideas can begin to come to life and to grow, compromises can come to life and grow. We don't get so polarized in our thoughts. But most importantly, this idea of it recreating both you and your partner, or you and your child, felt and feels very redemptive to me, because we're going to make mistakes. We're going to have arguments. It's just, we're not little robots and all think the same thing. We're not running the same programs in our head, right?
Right.
So to know that I can blow it, like I can really blow it. I can have a blowout with my husband, and make him, send him to the couch to sleep at night, which I have not done not in a very long time. Or I can scream at my kid, which I listen, I'm human. I feel embarrassed about that. But to think that listening will repair that because it recreates us is such a critical notion to me, that's why I think of listening as being really the greatest portion of all healthy relationships. It has to be rooted in listening. Thanks for listening to the Parenting Horizons podcast.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please share with your family and friends. And if you'd like to hear more about Julie's work, join one of her parenting groups, or see about individual counseling, please visit parentinghorizons.com. Or you can email Julie at julie.ross@parentinghorizons.com.
See you next time.